Boa noite, bem-vindos a mais uma sessão do FIC, uma iniciativa da Câmara Municipal de Cascais e do Grupo Editorial Leia. Obrigada por terem vindo. São muitos vocês, caramba. Olá, olá, tanta gente. Vamos falar com o Paul Auster. O Paul Auster não precisa de grandes apresentações. É um dos grandes escritores norte-americanos, vários livros, muitos prémios, mesmo muitos prémios. É um homem sem papas na língua. Fez 70 anos em fevereiro e ele pergunta-se, como poeta, como é que isto aconteceu a um pequeno rapaz. Mas aconteceu. E tem este livro novo, absolutamente maravilhoso, chamado 4321, 7 anos de trabalho, e onde ele está todo e ao mesmo tempo não está, porque, como tudo na vida, a ficção é autobiográfica e não é. E vamos ver. Vamos começar por ouvi-lo. Paul Auster gosta de ler alto. Lê alto como um exercício de reconhecimento do seu próprio texto, de detecção de pormenores, repetições, palavras, e considera que a musicalidade do texto é essencial. E, portanto, vamos começar por o ouvir, agora no início, e depois conversamos.
Seems to be working.
Yeah.
Okay. It didn't take me 7 years to write it.
Yeah?
No.
Sorry.
Three and a half.
You're very fast.
But it was 7 years since the last novel. But there were other
Então,
books.
são 7 anos antes do... São
Since
7
the
anos
novel,
que demorou para publicar um livro novo, mas demorou 3 anos, portanto foi muito rápido, porque o livro é muito grande. Foi muito rápido, afinal. Estou a brincar. 3 anos a escrever, peço desculpa, lápis meu.
Just to be accurate. Anyway, I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the book. So here we go. Most of you understand English, yes? Yeah, okay. Okay, this is how it begins. According to family legend, Ferguson's grandfather departed on foot from his native city of Minsk with 100 rubles sewn into the lining of his jacket, traveled west to Hamburg through Warsaw and Berlin, and then booked passage on a ship called the Empress of China, which crossed the Atlantic in rough winter storms and sailed into New York Harbor on the first day of the 20th century. While waiting to be interviewed by an immigration official at Ellis Island, he struck up a conversation with a fellow Russian Jew. The man said to him, "Forget the name Reznikov. It won't do you any good here. You need an American name for your new life in America, something with a good American ring to it." Since English was still an alien tongue to Isaac Reznikov in 1900, he asked his older, more experienced compatriot for a suggestion. "Tell them you're Rockefeller," the man said. "You can't go wrong with that." An hour passed, then another hour, and by the time the 19-year-old Reznikov sat down to be questioned by the immigration official, he had forgotten the name the man had told him to give. "Your name?" the official asked. Slapping his head in frustration, the weary immigrant blurted out in Yiddish, "Ich hab vergessen," I've forgotten. And so it was that Isaac Reznikov began his new life in America as Ichabod Ferguson.
Obrigada. Há pouco, Paul, tu dizias que o navio chamado The Empress of China tinha uma história e que ninguém sabe dessa história. Nós, como gostamos de coisas inéditas e considerando que isto é uma turnê e o 7º país onde tu estás, acho maravilhoso termos uma coisa que ninguém sabe e que só nós é que vamos saber.
Nobody knows this, but years ago I read a book by an American writer and critic named Irving Howe, Howe, and he wrote a book, a very good book, a large study called The World of Our Fathers, which is the story of Jewish immigrants in New York City. So one of the chapters is about the Yiddish newspapers in New York at the turn of the last century. And these Yiddish reporters would often look at the American papers, in the English ones, to get ideas for stories. And so one reporter saw a headline in in a paper that said, Empress of China on maiden voyage to New York. And that means a ship called the Empress of China was on its first voyage. Well, he didn't quite understand. So the next day, in the Yiddish newspaper, the headline said, Empress of China coming to New York to look for a husband. So I thought, I mean, no one can know that, but it put me in the right frame of mind as I was starting the book, all these confusions of language. Yeah.
4321 4321 é um livro sobre o desenvolvimento pessoal, é um livro sobre o desdobramento, é um livro sobre o condicional, o que é que teria acontecido se me tivesse acontecido A ou se me tivesse acontecido B. E temos 4 personagens, que na verdade começam por ser apenas uma, não é? Archie Isaac Ferguson. E é um livro ambicioso, porque no início tinhas pensado que irias para a idade adulta e depois decidiste ficar só no início da idade adulta. Portanto, temos a infância, temos a adolescência e temos o início da idade adulta destas 4 personagens. É muito difícil falar dos Ferguson sem desvendar a história, não é? Para quem não leu o livro, mas foi uma ideia. Tu dizes que este livro resulta dos livros anteriores, que precisaste de escrever os outros para chegar aqui.
Of course, while I was writing them, I didn't know that they would lead to this. But the 2 books I published before this were autobiographical books, Winter Journal and Report from the Interior. I couldn't tell you the titles in Portuguese, but you get the idea. These were 2 books which talked about my life in various ways. The first book mostly about the body, and the second book about, I suppose, the mind or developing ideas. But these 2 books were the first time as an adult I had actually thought about my childhood in a serious way. It's just, I hadn't done it until then. And it seemed to plow up all this ground, and I found it very interesting territory. And I think that was what gave me the impulse to continue writing about childhood in a novel. And so here's the result. I think without those 2 previous works, I wouldn't have ever thought of doing this.
Queres saber como é que se diz em português? Relatório do interior e diário de inverno. Ok? Pronto, ficaste na mesma, claro. Óbvio. Ok. Passa-se na geografia e no teu tempo, este livro. Na mesma geografia. E levanta questões que hoje podem parecer questões muito pertinentes, porque voltamos a falar de racismo, voltamos a falar de guerra do Vietnã, manifestações estudantis, xenofobia, antissemitismo. E olhando para o mundo tal e qual como ele está hoje, não estamos muito longe do estado em que estávamos, afinal.
No, I agree. And as I was writing the book, I had this eerie sense more and more that the things I was talking about that happened mostly 50 years ago or more are still happening in the United States. To such a degree that my original title, the one I was working with in the beginning, was simply going to be Ferguson. That's what I wanted to call the novel, which is the name of the boy, Archie Ferguson. But then, about a year and a half in, this terrible thing happened in the United States in a place that I had never heard of, and I don't think anybody outside of the state of Missouri had ever heard of Ferguson, Missouri, in which a town in which a white policeman shot an unarmed black young man, killed him. And this caused a tremendous uproar in the country. And it seemed that we were back in the old days. And we continue to be back in the old days. And the conflicts that we had then some of them are different. We don't have the Vietnam War anymore, which was the great cataclysm of my young life, and I think probably the greatest trauma in American history. A war so stupid and so badly conceived and so devastating to so many millions of people, fought essentially for nothing. But it was a war that divided the country back then. A war I think we've never really recovered from, all these years later. And so, okay, Vietnam is over, but it's not really over. More recently, we've had another stupid war in Iraq, which has caused immense devastation, disruption, chaos, and the consequences of George W. Bush's invasion of that country are still being felt around the world. So that's similar. The racial problems are similar. The divide between rich and poor is even greater now than it was 50 years ago. The two parties that run the country, the Democrats and the Republicans, are less able to talk to each other than in the past. And even more important, it seems the country itself is entirely divided down the middle. And the two halves don't even speak the same language anymore. So America's in a very precarious spot right now. And similar to back then. Maybe worse now, I'm not sure. We'll see how it plays out.
É inevitável falarmos do Trump, mas vale despachar isto, não é? E eu sei que, desculpem, eu sei que tu estás um bocadinho deprimido, surpreendido com a vitória do Trump, deprimido e preocupado, digamos assim. Queres falar um pouco sobre isto?
I don't even use his name anymore. I can't say it. I just call him 45. That's his name for 45. Me. He's the 45th president. Okay. So he's 45. I mean, what can I say that you don't already know? As a New Yorker, I've known about this person for many decades. And he's always been a buffoon in New York City. No one has ever taken him seriously. And I think he's demented. He's certainly he's ignorant about what America is and how the government is set up, what the country's all about. And beyond his great talent for connecting with angry people, connecting his own angers with the angers of other people, which I think you have to say he's a genius at this. But otherwise, I think he's stupid. And when someone is both ignorant and stupid, you can't learn. And he's never going to learn. What you're seeing now is what you're going to get. All right, I understand that such people as this now number 45 exist. But what I don't understand, even though I could give you 100 reasons why it happened, and it would take way too long, I can't go into it tonight. But what really disturbs me is that over 60 million people voted for him. This is hard to believe. All right, it was, what's the term people use? Perfect storm. I guess about 72 things had to go right for him to win, and they all went right. Even if only 71 had gone right, he would have lost. But it was just one thing after another, and it kept breaking in his favor. I became fairly certain that he was going to, if not win, at least get very close to winning when England voted on the Brexit in June, before our November election, which showed that polls aren't accurate, because all the British polls said the UK was going to vote to remain, and obviously we know the results. And so the polls in America were wrong as well. And it's a disaster. I mean, he's and his people are dismantling the country bit by bit. I mean, just take one example is all the environmental improvements that Obama had put in place, but by presidential order, because he couldn't get Congress to do anything. Obama was stymied and blocked throughout his last 6 years in office. So it's easy to undo these because they're not laws, they're decrees. So 45 has undone those decrees. It doesn't mean it's forever. I mean, if someone else comes into office later, you can undo the undoing and go back to what we had. And one would hope actually vote these things into law. But the one thing so far that's working to the advantage of those of us who are not in favor of this administration is that their incompetence, because of their ignorance, has made it impossible for them to get any serious legislation passed. So, aside from these presidential orders, no new laws have been passed. So, and at the same time, and I hope it persists, for the first time since the years of the book, there's a new activism alive in America today. Millions of people taking a stand. It's not necessarily coming from the Democratic Party either, who seem to be very confused and in disarray, really. They don't really know what they stand for anymore. No, these protests are coming from the grassroots, out there in the whole country, led, I should add, for the most part by women. And women are taking an awfully big role in all of this. And I think we're going to see a lot of women running for Congress next year. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens. Yeah.
Podemos pegar aí, nas mulheres. Este livro 4321 é dedicado a Siri Usfat, que é a tua mulher há 36 anos e é uma feminista convicta, diria. Porque é que agora, 30 anos depois, este livro é dedicado a Siri?
Well, because I'm a feminist too. And also because I love her, and also because I admire her so much. And I thought the biggest book of my life, in terms of size in any case, should be dedicated to her. Yeah.
Vamos falar um pouco sobre o teu processo de escrita. Para quem não sabe, Paul Auster continua a escrever à mão, caneta ou lápis, não sei. Continua a passar tudo à máquina e é uma máquina de escrever. Não usa telemóvel, é preciso dizer isto é maravilhoso, ele não usa telemóvel. E há bocado disse-me que o telefone lá de casa tinha uma roldana, mas acho que estava só a gozar comigo. Mas pronto. O facto de viveres com uma escritora, estavas há pouco dizias que facilitava a tua vida porque tens alguém que te compreende. E a primeira leitora é a Siri e tu lês alto. E eu ler alto é uma coisa importante e começámos por aqui esta sessão. Queres explicar um bocadinho, enfim, mesmo o processo de escrita e como é que te leva a esta necessidade de ler alto?
Writing novels is not like writing a newspaper article. Writing novels is it's literature, it's poetry. And for me, the prose of a novel is all about the music of the words, the music of the sentences, how one paragraph moves into another, and without the music, there's nothing. And each book for me has always had a different kind of music. And I start to hear it in my head, almost before there's any story or anything. It's just a buzz, and it kind of vibrates through my body. And then that music starts to take on substance with characters and situations, and it grows from there. And I have to listen very carefully, and so that I know when I've done it right, and also I know when I've done it wrong. A lot of writing is just rewriting and crossing out and eliminating rather than adding. So reading it out loud is essential to me. And I've read all my work to Siri, for the past 36 years, which includes all the novels I've ever published. And I can hear myself better than if I were just reading it alone in my room. And then, she gives me her comments. She's always right. When she says, that word, change it, she's right. You need another paragraph here, she's right. She's always right. And so I have great faith in her. I'm happy to say that when I gave her finally the whole manuscript, then she reads my books alone when I'm done. And I should add, I do all this for her too. It's a mutual effort. She sat on our bed, or lay on the bed in our bedroom for 4 days and read the book. Very slowly, very carefully. And I know it sounds like a joke, but it's true. 1,100 pages of typescript, and there was only one word that she thought I should change. And I changed it. Yeah.
O processo, não sei quantos aspirantes a autores publicados existem nesta sala, talvez alguns. Tu foste rejeitado 17 vezes. O primeiro volume da trilogia de Nova Iorque foi rejeitado 17 vezes. E concluíste então que não se faz isto por dinheiro, não se faz isto por estatuto, faz isto por necessidade. Não? Escreve-se por necessidade.
I think anyone who thinks that he or she is going to make money doing this should really take a long, deep breath and think it through, because that's not why you do this. I think all those rejections finally were good for me, because they actually proved my inner conviction, which is that I wasn't writing, forget about money, but I wasn't writing even to get published. Because as I went through this, because it took about 1.5 years of getting these rejections. I started it was the first book of the New York trilogy, City of Glass. And then I wrote the second book, the little one, Ghosts, in the middle. And I was halfway through the third when the first one was accepted. Of course, it was by a very small publisher who wasn't in New York. He was in Los Angeles, California. So the New York trilogy was published in California, which is pretty strange, but life is strange. And so that's what happened. And the advances I got, I can tell you very proudly, $100, $100, and $100. That was it. So you do the math.
Bom, mas entretanto foste traduzido para 40 e tal países, não é? E as traduções são importantes, as turnês pela Europa, as turnês pelo mundo são importantes, as pessoas querem ouvir-te, querem ler-te, e a vida mudou, não é? Enfim, tu és hoje um grande escritor e reconhecido como um grande escritor.
Well, it's the great irony. Okay, 17 rejections, and then 45 publishers around the world eventually. So it makes you stop and think that you really have to stick to your convictions. You can't let people influence you. Because those rejections, I should add, it wasn't that anyone said it was bad. They all said it was a very interesting book, but that it was so weird that they didn't know what to do with it. And would I please change the ending? Would I, make it more normal? And I said, no. I mean, you take it or leave it. You have to stand by your guns. And so it proves that publishers don't know what they're doing either. And it's somehow satisfying every time I see one of those people who rejected me. I can smile, say, "Hi there, Mr. Bright Guy," right? Yeah. So, anyway, I was a child's voice. Yes. Oh, there. Hi there, kid.
She's been reading you since she was 1.
Interesting. So anyway, no. Joking aside, I'm kidding now. I'm on this tour. I'll tell you why. Out of gratitude to my publishers, the ones who've been sticking with me all these years, and I'm never going to do it again. I mean, this is the last time. I'm a bit too old now for going to 7 countries in 1 month. It's been very tiring, and this is my last public event, by the way. So it's a kind of celebration. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be back here in Portugal, because I have a real love of this place, and I've spent quite a bit of time here. And as some of you might know, 11 years ago now, I made a film not far from where we're sitting. And I have to say, the crew that I had, which was 90% Portuguese, was the best people I've ever worked with. These were the hardest working, the most dedicated, the most enthusiastic people, and we were very small. It was, we were only about 20 people total. On American movies, I'd had a crew of 60 on the previous movie. And these 20 did the work of 60. And they did it with great skill, pride, and real professionalism. So it was humanly, it was a great experience working here. So thank you, Portugal. Really good.
Mas tu estás pouco desiludido com o cinema, não é? 4 filmes depois, achas que não voltarás, a dedicar-te ao cinema?
Well, it's always been a secondary activity for me. I was lucky enough to do anything in movies because I've always loved them since I was a small kid. A real passion for film. And I got lucky and was able to work on 2 movies in collaboration with Wayne Wang, and then I made 2 on my own. But I was 47 when we made the first one, and how often does a 47-year-old person get a chance to learn a new job? And that's what happened to me. And Wayne and I worked for 2 solid years on the 2 films. And so for me, it was like going to film school. I learned everything about how to make movies. And it was just so exciting and so good for me, I think, to get out of my room for a while and work with other people, which is something I actually enjoy, but only in certain doses. Basically I like to be alone, but getting out for a while was good. I don't know. I don't think, well, first of all, I have no idea for a new film. And second of all, I probably couldn't raise the money anymore if I did have an idea, because American movies have changed hugely in the last 25 years. What you could do then, you can't do now. And then the third factor is, well, as we said in the beginning, I'm not so young anymore. And so how much time do I have left? I don't know. But I want to spend it writing books.
Voltando ao livro 4321, um dos Fergusons é fanático por cinema, passa tardes inteiras no cinema, vê cinema com a mãe, filmes atrás de filmes, e temos ainda uma fixação que eu creio que seja tua, do Bucha e Estica, que nós chamamos em Portugal Bucha e Estica, que são duas personagens cómicas, preto e branco, filmes muito antigos. Eu estou a falar assim devagar por causa do delay da tradução, não é porque seja propriamente lenta, mas estou a tentar. Estou a tentar. Pronto. Então, há muito daquilo que tu gostas dentro deste livro, fatalmente. Há beisebol, há o episódio do Trovão, que contaste no Caderno Vermelho, que é um livro que saiu cá nas edições Asa e que é um episódio verdadeiro e que te marcou na adolescência. Portanto, há muito de ti, muitos episódios e gostos pessoais neste livro. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, tu dizes que não és tu.
Oh, that's about 8 questions all at once.
I'm saving it.
I don't know where to begin. Well, we'll talk about Archie, Ferguson 3, the one who is crazy about movies. Well, but of course, I had to have seen all the movies I write about. I'm not going to, so of course there's an overlap, but I never was, I like Laurel and Hardy very much, but I was never devoted to them the way Ferguson is in the book. And I never wrote a book called How Laurel and Hardy Saved My Life. And then, okay, now then you jump to another thing, which is, I guess, the emotional heart of the book. The thing that I think is the autobiographical core, something that's haunted me for my whole life. And I've written about it, as you said, in the Red Notebook, in a sequence of true stories called Why Write? And in that sequence, I tell the story of how, when I was 14 years old, I saw another boy struck and killed by lightning right next to me, closer than we are. And that changed my life entirely. 1 second, the kid is alive. The next second, he's dead. Until then, I think I thought I had been walking on fairly solid ground. I was 14. I didn't know anything. But then I understood that anything can happen to anyone at any moment. And it was an enormous revelation. I've never really recovered from it. I think it's affected how I think about the world, and I'm convinced that it's affected my work down to the core. So it's that story that haunted me and has haunted me for so long that is at the very epicenter of the book. But the book is not about that, but it happens in effect twice. There is a storm, but the way the boy is killed is different from what happened in my life. But then one of the Fergusons has the awful experience of watching his friend drop dead in front of him, but in this case of a brain aneurysm. But aside from a few things I took directly from my life, for example, the grandparents' apartment on West 58th Street, I stole from my own grandparents. But I don't know, writers are doing this all the time. This is not...
And the basketball game?
That was the one incident of any length is there's a crazy basketball game that's in the book somewhere in the first half. And it's a triple overtime game that Ferguson's team wins with a long shot from half court at the buzzer to win. And I was in that game. That was a real game. And there was nearly a riot afterwards. There are a few other things, I suppose, that are autobiographical. One of the Fergusons reads Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment when he's 15, and he's changed by it, and decides to become a novelist. Well, that happened to me. Yeah, that was the big thunderbolt of revelation. Saying to myself, if this is what a novel can be, if this is what a novel can do to a reader, then I want to write novels. There could be nothing better than that. And then, since we're putting all our cards on the table tonight, this same Ferguson 4, the one who wants to be a fiction writer, there are some examples of his work in the book, things when he's 18 and 19 years old, and those extracts are actually things I wrote when I was around 19 and 20. There are two things. And I have these papers lying around, and I looked through them, and I thought, well, 19, how could I couldn't make it up. And there it is. Crazy works by a rather crazy boy. And but then there's a long story that he writes when he's younger about a pair of shoes. The two main characters are shoes, Hank and Frank. And all the shoes in the story have rhyming names, Molly and Dolly, and Ed and Fred, and it's pretty funny stuff. Well, I made that up for the novel, trying to think, what would a precocious 14-year-old boy do? And this is what I came up with. And another thing to prove why this is not, however, an autobiographical novel is that all these Fergusons are incredibly precocious. They're doing things at a very young age that most people don't do till they're much older. And I can assure you, I was not precocious. I was just slogging away with perhaps more dreams than tangible products to show anybody.
São 4 Fergusons. Tens preferido?
Oh no! It's impossible. They're all they're all equally loved, and I think to write novels you have to love your characters, even the ones who are not even so pleasant. But you have to suspend judgment and sympathize and get yourself inside their skin, and it's not your skin. It's the skin of an imaginary being. And they really become actual people as I'm working. I feel that they exist, often more vividly than three-dimensional people that I see on the street or something like these. These are important beings for me. And no, there's no preference. I can say that I can tell you the strengths and weaknesses of the 4 of them. It's not that any of them is perfect by any means. In fact, far from it. But no, I have equal sympathy for them all. Yeah.
E ainda vives com eles. Depois de 3 anos de trabalho, ainda tens tudo isto na cabeça e estes rapazes todos dentro de ti. E não é fácil, não é? No, it's not easy.
Well, I'm trying to forget them now. I'm trying to get the whole thing out of my system. Being on this long trip doesn't help, but this is coming to an end eventually, and I have another project in mind that I want to start getting seriously into when I get home, and not a novel yet. I'm not ready to do another novel, but I think if I can do this nonfiction project, by the time I'm finished, then I can feel more stories in my back, like they're shadows now, and they're whispering, and the whispers are getting louder. So maybe in a year or two, I'll really be ready to go and create new characters.
Há personagens que voltam. Quer dizer, tu resolves, processas, andas para a frente, escreves outras coisas, mas há personagens que voltam. Em 4, 3, 2, 1, há personagens de livros anteriores. E há sempre Queen, de alguma maneira, não é?
Well, in just one cycle, Ferguson 1. He's the Ferguson who goes to Columbia University, which is where I went. So not only are there characters from my previous novels there, who in those novels had gone to Columbia. You know, there's Fogg from Moon Palace, Zimmer from Moon Palace and the Book of Illusions. There's Quinn. Quinn always, he's appeared, 3 or 4 times in novels since City of Glass, but always as a shadowy figure. You don't know too much about him, but he's there. And Walker and Freeman from Invisible. But there are also, in the Columbia section, 4 real people I went to school with, and they're still alive. And one of them was the head of the student rebellion in 1968, Mark Rudd, and he's very much alive. And so I sent, and then there's another person, Les Gottesman. There's a poem that Ferguson reads in the Columbia Literary Magazine. It's one of the reasons why he wants to go there, and it's a real poem, and it was for me when I read it at 17. I thought, wow, if they have a college and they let people write poems like this, I want to go there. So, and the poem had a refrain. It says, "A steady fuck is good for you." And it was in the magazine. And so the author of the poem is still alive. And I called him. I said, "Can I send you the manuscript? And is it okay if I quote the poem and use your name?" Fine. He was good with this. And so there are 4 real people, and then all my imaginary characters from previous novels, all intermingling, but just for a couple of pages. It's not a big part of the book.
Amy Schneiderman. Amy Schneiderman é a mulher que é transversal a todos os Fergusons. Ela torna-se uma pessoa diferente a cada Ferguson também. Tu tiveste uma Amy Schneiderman quando tinhas 17, 18 anos?
I wish I had, but I never knew anyone like Amy Schneiderman at all. But Amy she's the female counterpart to Ferguson. I can't imagine the book without her in it. She's a force. Amy is a young girl on fire. And so Ferguson 1 falls in love with her, and they have a long relationship, which lasts for years, 4 or 5 years. And they're very young when it starts. Another Ferguson, the one whose father dies when he's 7, and when he's 12, his mother remarries, and she marries Amy's uncle. And so Amy becomes Ferguson's cousin. But in number 4, when the mother and the father get divorced, she marries the other Schneiderman brother, and Amy then becomes Ferguson's stepsister. They all love her, and finally she eludes them all. They can't hold on to her.
Há pouco combinamos que ias ler bocadinho daquela parte em que eles decidem ir viver juntos. Queres ler esse bocadinho?
Yes, absolutely. So this is from, deep into the book. In the English version, I'm on page 500 and, 28.
322 em português.
And so, the situation is as follows. This is Ferguson 1, the one who's a student at Columbia in New York. His first year as a student is over. And Amy is going to the college across the street, Barnard College. And they've been seeing each other all year, but he's had to live in a dormitory, and she lives in an apartment, which she shares with other students. But now Ferguson doesn't have to live in a dormitory anymore, and he moves into one of the empty rooms in the big apartment Amy lives in. So for the first time in his life, he's actually living with a woman. They're 19 years old. The previous summer, they'd gone to a 1-month trip to France, and they had slept every night together then. But this is, now they're really moving in together. And so I just wanted to give a feeling of New York in 1966. Summer in hot, unbreathable New York. One 90-degree day after another, as the broiling asphalt melted in the sun and the concrete pavement slabs burned into the soles of their shoes. The air so dense with humidity that even the bricks on the facades of buildings seemed to be oozing sweat. And everywhere, the stink of garbage rotting on the sidewalks. American bombs were falling on Hanoi and Haiphong. The heavyweight champion was talking to the press about Vietnam. No Viet Cong ever called me nigger, he said, thus conflating the two American wars into a single war. The poet Frank O'Hara was run over by a dune buggy on a Fire Island beach and killed at the age of 40. And Ferguson and Amy were both trapped in boring summer jobs. Bookstore clerk for him, typing and filing for her. Low-paid work that forced them to ration their gauloise. But Bobby George, and that's Ferguson's oldest friend from childhood, who is in the Army now and a great baseball player. But Bobby George was playing baseball in Germany. The West End bar had air conditioning, and once they returned to their hot, airless apartment, Ferguson could run cool washcloths over Amy's naked body and dream they were back in France. It was the summer of politics and movies, of dinners at the Schneiderman's apartment on West 75th Street, and the Adler's apartment, that's Ferguson's grandparents, and the Adler's apartment on West 58th Street, of celebrating Gil Schneiderman's move to the New York Times after the Herald Tribune shut down its presses and vanished from the scene, of going to concerts at Carnegie Hall with Gil and Amy's brother Jim, of riding the 104 bus down Broadway to the Thalia and New Yorker. Those are movie theaters, neither one of which exists anymore. To the Thalia and the New Yorker to escape the heat by watching movies, which they jointly decided should always be comedies, since the grimness of the moment demanded that they laugh whenever it was possible. And who better to get them going than the Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields, or the screwball inanities starring Grant and Powell, Hepburn, Dunn, and Lombard. They couldn't get enough of them. They jumped onto the bus the minute they found out another comedy double feature was playing, and what a relief it was to forget the war and the stinking garbage for a few hours as they sat in the air-conditioned dark. But when no comedies were to be seen in the neighborhood or anywhere else, they returned to their summer project of grinding through what they called the literature of dissent, reading Marx and Lenin because one had to read them, and Trotsky and Rosa Luxemburg, Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman, Sartre and Camus, Malcolm X and Frantz Fanon, Sorel and Bakunin, Marcuse and Adorno, looking for answers to help explain what had happened to their country, which seemed to be collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. But while Amy found herself moving closer to a Marxist reading of events, the inevitable overthrow of capitalism, Ferguson had his doubts, not just because the Hegelian dialectic turned on its head struck him as a mechanical and simplistic view of the world, but because there was no class consciousness among American workers, no sympathy for socialist thought anywhere in the culture, and therefore no chance for the great upheaval Amy was predicting. In other words, they disagreed, even if they were essentially on the same side. But none of those differences seemed to matter, since neither one of them felt wholly certain about anything at that point, and each understood that the other could have been right, or that both of them could have been wrong, and better to air their doubts freely and openly than to march together in blind lockstep until they fell off the edge of a cliff. Most of all, it was the summer of looking at Amy, of watching her put on lipstick and brush her impossible hair, of studying her hands as she rubbed body lotion into her palms and then ran those palms over her legs and arms and breasts, of washing her hair for her as she closed her eyes and sank into the lukewarm water in the tub, the ancient tub with the claw feet and the rust stains running through the cracked porcelain, of lying in bed in the morning and seeing her dress herself in a corner of the room as light came through the window and surrounded her, smiling at him as she slipped into her panties and bra and cotton skirt, the small domestic details of living within her feminine orbit, tampons, birth control pills, the pills for when her stomach cramped up during hard periods, the household chores they did together, shopping for food, washing dishes, and the way she would sometimes bite her lower lip as they stood in the kitchen, slicing and chopping onions and tomatoes for the pot of chili that would feed them for a weekend's worth of dinners. The concentration in her eyes whenever she painted her fingernails or toenails to, quote, make a good impression at work. Watching her shave her legs and underarms as she sat quietly in the tub, then climbing into the tub with her and soaping down her slithery white skin, the unearthly smoothness of her skin against his hands, and sex and sex and sex, sweaty summer sex with no cover or sheet on top of them as they rolled around on the bed in her room, and the creaking old fans stirred the air a bit and cooled off nothing. The shudders and sighs, the yowls and groans, in her, on top of her, under her, beside her, the deep laughs trapped in her throat, the surprise tickling attacks, the sudden snatches of old pop songs from their childhood, lullabies, dirty limericks, Mother Goose poems, and grumpy Amy narrowing her eyes in another one of her snits. Happy Amy gulping down ice water and cold beers, eating fast, shoveling it in like a ravenous stevedore, the snorts of laughter watching Fields and the M Brothers. There ain't no Sanity Clause, Archie. And the magnificent ah she exhaled one evening when he handed her his translation of an early poem by René Char, a poem so short that it consisted of only 6 words, a brief blink entitled Lasner's Hand, which was a reference to the 19th century criminal poet who later surfaced as a character in Children of Paradise. Worlds of eloquence have been lost. It could never end. The sun was stuck in the sky. A page had gone missing from the book, and it would always be summer as long as they didn't breathe too hard or ask for too much. Always the summer when they were 19 and were finally perhaps almost, on the brink of saying goodbye to the moment when everything was still in front of them. Okay. One last question.
One last question. O que é que foi que disse a vovó? Paul, dos Fergusons é bissexual. E tu disseste numa entrevista que, não sendo tu bissexual, tiveste que o imaginar. Certo? E uma das coisas que a imaginação tem é que pode escapar-nos. E há pouco disseste-me que talvez este fosse o teu último livro, que pensas sempre que este é o último livro, que não vais ter mais ideias, que não vais ter mais histórias para contar, que talvez tenha acabado aqui.
But then I told you it's not the end.
Yeah,
yeah.
You told me about the
But the thing about it's Ferguson 3 who likes both boys and girls, or girls and boys. It was really not very difficult to imagine this. I mean, desire is desire, after all. It's very easy as a writer to project yourself into these scenes. I've written scenes of women making love in other books. It's just not a big deal. That was the least of my problems writing this book, I can tell you. Listen, every time I finish something, I feel completely hollowed out, absolutely empty. And so my natural conclusion would be, well, I'll never be able to write again. But now that time has passed, I can feel that the water tank is filling up again, and something's happening, and I'm ready to get going again. So I think I'm going to find a way, somehow or other, to keep going until I fall over, and that's the end.
E pronto, e foi esta a conversa com o Paul Auster. Ele vai estar aqui para vos dar todos os autógrafos que quiserem. Espero que tenham gostado. Mais uma vez queria agradecer à Câmara Municipal de Cascais e ao Grupo Editorial Leia, à programadora, à escritora Inês Pedrosa, e a todos vós por estarem aqui. Espero que consigam o vosso autógrafo.